Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we cultivate virtue to bring to our home and yours. I'm Thomas McCuddy,
And I'm Thomas Quaggabush.
and we are just us today.
It's
So
a duo.
Nick is on vacation, and that's what we're going to call that. So we're going to talk today. Speaking of which, we're going to talk today. Really, just kind of have a conversation about the idea of the virtuous use of leisure and rest, because we're coming into a time. We're already in a time in the United States when schools are out. We're in our summer vacation, and we just saw an article the other day. Should kids rot for the next 2 months? Like, terrible. You should not even ask that question. But since it was asked, we're going to deal with it.
Yeah.
But I know at this same time of the year in South Africa, it is the winter break, and it's the longer of the breaks. And so I know that sometimes people go off on holiday, but you might have some of that same question, like, what do you do? And I also know, like, in the States, our winter break is a little bit shorter, and it's Christmas time.
Yep.
So it's a lot less of what do you do with them? It's Christmas. That's what you do.
Just play with all your toys you just got.
Right. Yeah. There's some of that, but if you're on a winter break, winter holiday, and you don't have those holidays,
Yep.
How do you use this time well? And this also comes out of a place where I know in our culture, and I know in my own life, I do this thing called, burning the candle at both ends. And then we're like, well, we're going to go on vacation, and we're going to, and as it happens in America, you go on vacation, and everyone jokes, oh, I need a vacation from my vacation.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to have some conversation just on what this looks like for families. And so we'll just start with, how are you guys and your family gonna spend the summer?
That's a good question. Well, usually my wife is a teacher in the United States. I don't know if it's different. They go year round typically in South Africa, right?
Yeah. So to clarify, we would consider the South Africa system year round,
Yeah.
which is different within the States. Our school year starts in August, and we have a very short, like maybe like a 2-week
Yeah.
Christmas break, and then schools are out from pretty much the end of May,
Yep.
maybe the beginning of June, all the way into August.
Yep.
So like
So you got a couple-
a solid 2 months where
So that's
yeah.
where we are. We're in North Carolina too, which is southern United States. So it's kind of talk about rotting. I feel like it gets hot, and there's only so much you can do here during the summer. Whether it's like, in terms of just activities, it's like we try to find somewhere we can cool off. But I think that question is it's interesting because you just put your teenagers, and so I'm thinking teenagers, like the little kids they tend to just be active, and they kind of find their way in their imagination or whatever during their leisure time. But the teenagers tend to just, like, they're either just mopey and bored, and if you just put them on their default mode, they'll just sit in their rooms and watch television or scroll on their phones or do whatever. And so for our family, we're just looking towards, like, what can we do to enrich ourselves? And I think this is kind of the essence of leisure, as I think of it. Is not as just some time you can sit in, like, in a pool or float around somewhere, with summer or here, but it's also to enrich. I think finding time to enrich ourselves in something that's other than the daily task of going to work, coming home, and doing that same thing. And I also see this as, we'll get into the biblical sense where this idea comes from as well. It's like the Sabbath rest. God instituted that day so that we find at least a day a week, even during the year, where we can be at rest and everything is at rest, and we have no obligations, and we can just worship, or we can just have our mind set on God during that period of time. I know Sunday has kind of taken that place for us Christians. But during the week, we have to be intentional with our time, especially with our children, because they don't, like, by their very nature, they don't want to do anything.
So multiple things going on here in that we can address. So going back to what you're talking about in terms of the Sabbath rest, in terms of what leisure is designed as, I think it's worth pointing out that idea of leisure, and I'm using this word specifically because the Greek word for leisure, what we translate as leisure, is actually skole, where we get the idea of school.
Mhm.
So it's funny because the way that in classical Christian world, school was the use of leisure time. Like
Yep.
that's why kids can go to school, is because they have the freedom, they have the leisure to go and learn. And adult learners understand this because if you're working a full-time job, when do you have the time? What are you going to do with that free time,
Yeah.
that leisure time? Are you going to use it for school? And you think of that as more work. But Joseph Pieper, in his book, Pieper was a German philosopher, middle 1900s. So this is right after World War II. And he was very much writing against this idea that we're trying to use our free time to make us better workers. That's not why you should have free time, so you can be a better cog for the machine.
Yeah.
That his was more of, you need this leisure, and it's during that leisure time that you can actually worship, that you have that freedom, that you can set aside this time and you can use that. And that's the whole idea, again, not just behind the, well, we need a focused time for worship, because ideally, you could put that in anywhere during the week.
Yep.
But the idea of setting aside and having that leisure, that focused time, that leisure isn't just rotting. It isn't just vegetating. I think that was the word we used when I was a kid. Like, you're gonna go and
Yep.
veg out, just sit and stare at the TV for 16 hours a day. And so that's not a good use. That's not really what leisure is. And now sometimes we need to unplug,
Yeah.
but I think this is why, as families, we need to be very conscientious in how we're using that time. That if you're going to take a holiday, and let's say you got 7 days, and you're going to go on holiday, and you're going to jam pack every moment with something, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. Because again, you're going to come back and you're going to be more tired than you were. Are you going to have great memories? Yes, but the human body can't keep going.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've read where they talk about there's a diminish of returns. There's actually there's different nations around the world right now that are adopting a 4-hour, or 4-hour, that'd be cool, 4-hour work
Yeah.
week, 4-day work week, opting, basically a 3-day weekend,
Mhm.
and they're seeing an increase in productivity.
It's I've heard, I've seen those studies, and it seems logical. A lot of times, especially as Christians, we have that one day, because Sundays tend to be. I mean, there is some leisure time after church, but for me, being a pastor at a church and being involved in different ministries, it's a day of work as well. Um, but yeah, this idea that we're trying to, like, in our culture, this kind of this pressure to constantly try to, like, make money and continuously work and work and work and work, and then feeling guilty if you're not out doing this job or doing this other job, and it doesn't seem like anybody actually, like, kind of gets ahead. It just seems like the more work you do, the more money you make, the more you spend, and or you're trying to live for the material things that are too expensive for your normal 9 to 5 job. And so you're trying to live beyond your means, and like you're saying, that there's this negative return, because our bodies are, we live in this world where, unfortunately, the second law of thermodynamics says that, that we're not getting any better. As we're growing older, we're getting a little worse. And I'm in my 40s now, and so are you. And there's back issues, there's knee issues, like all these things things I did when I was younger and I wasn't thinking about, are now back to haunt me. And I need that rest. And like, ignoring that rest can throw me off a whole week, because it's really really important.
But I think we take that mindset, like I said, where, well, if you don't get done the 8-hour day, well, I'll go with 10 hours, I'll go 12 hours, go
Yep.
15. And then on the flip side of that, it's like, well, I'm going to take a whole week off and I'm going to vegetate. And so that's why, like, as we think about some of these longer holidays where, you're going to be off, at least a month, let's say that's pretty long time. There's almost that element of, well, if I take off on this holiday for a month and I vegetate, well, then I'll be good for months, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't work that way any more than, well, if I just need to get a little bit more work done, I'll just have longer days. That's not how we operate. That's not how we function. And so I want to the scripture here is we're talking about the concept of leisure and using it well. In Mark 6, Jesus says in verse Mark 6:30, the apostles returned to Jesus and told him all they had done and taught. So this is like, like this is almost like the work report. Like, hey,
Mhm.
we've done a lot of stuff. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while." And so it's not, okay, let's get back out there. It's let's go to a desolate place. And it says, for many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat.
Wow.
Okay.
Mm.
So we have, and this is where we're going to get to the feeding the 5,000. We know that Jesus was hard pressed. We know that people were coming to the disciples. We know that a lot was going on. And so here's Jesus. He's saying, let's go to this desolate place. And I want you to picture in your mind, this is not Jesus saying, hey, let's go out in this field and what? Stare at the animals. Like, this is not to go vegetate. Like,
Mhm.
there was actually this leisure to get away. Some of that is to physically rest, but I think there's that element even when I like go to church and we have a fellowship. That is in a sense that leisure. Like, we're active, we're doing something, but we're recharging
Yep.
in a way, and to be conscientious of how we recharge. And this is Jesus recognizing, and you got to think, it's one thing that if you're working in an office and it's like, okay, well, I can get more reports done, whatever it is you're doing, more paperwork. These guys are healing the sick. They are doing miracles. They're casting out demons. Jesus in his ministry is absolutely helping people. And what we see is Jesus. He's not trying to burn his candle at both ends. I mean, people are trying to do that, burn it both ends and in the middle. They're coming to him.
Yep.
They're pressing on him, but he's recognizing his limits
Yep.
and that leisure, that chance to recharge. It's going to make Jesus better and doing what he's doing. And he's trying to do this with the disciples as well. So God builds into us this need for this leisure, this
Mhm.
time away. But the idea is, how do we actually use that well? So again, we go back to in our countries, we have at least a month, maybe 2 months.
Mhm.
How do we go about using that time? If you guys like, and again, so I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah.
As your family, like, have y'all thought about how you're going to do this and ways that you will use this time well? What are some of the things that you guys have in mind?
Well, yeah, we one of the things like I don't want to do is just to fill our time with busy stuff. And like I think picking out like particular things that are quality
Hmm.
that we're gonna do as a family. I think that's important too because my wife and I like I work from home and doing a lot most of my work and yeah I'm at the church at time and time, but my wife's at school and she's there for a long period of time. So this is the first long stretch of time where we're just together every day. So we have to get used to each other somewhat, and just getting like because I have my routines, what I do during the week, and she's at work, and so we kind of at first we're trying to just figure things out, but as we get the ball rolling, we make intentional times, and we're like, well, and we talk. You alluded to a little bit, and as Jesus is going to these desolate places, and what's in a desolate place is really just kind of something that is just silence. There's lack of distractions, or there's also this place where you can kind of, yeah, you find true rest in those times. And I want to share that with my kids, and I also want have this quality time with my family, whether it be a hike or, um, whatever, going doing those types of things, and then during that time, not just like we have our own peaceful moments, but also having intentional conversations.
Hmm.
Stuff that like, these unique times that we have created for ourselves gives us opportunity to have some conversations, catch up with one another. Cause even as a homeschool family, you can also kind of lose track of those internal desires that our kids have. Like, what do you want to do with your life? Like
Hmm.
having these real deep conversations. What can I do? Like, we can kind of, and we've talked about this a little bit in, other conversations in this podcast, but just having these really kind of intentional times with our family. And I mean, pretty much that's kind of how my wife and I are doing that, especially, with reading as well. Like that's something I like to do by nature, but having my kids, like we're all going to sit down and we're going to be quiet and we're just going to read whatever we have. And, whatever it's a book or a novel, we have that time and we'll, reflect on the things that we're reading and talk about like, my sons get really excited to tell me about those things, and those, and just having that time. I think that's and recognizing that, I think I think part of our conversation is the idea of that this is a time set aside for something, not just vegging out. and
Hmm.
and I think the intention of doing that, you don't have to be rigid and scheduleized. I think that kind of takes it away too. But having, these periods of time where we're not going to just, you know watch whatever, and put our phones away, and maybe just hide them somewhere, or put them in a central place where we can't be distracted, and just, I think
From
it's more.
9:30 to 10 a.m., I'm going to have my nothing box. I'm
Yeah.
just going to stare off and think of nothing.
Yeah.
Then exactly at 10, so yeah, we don't want to do that. So a couple of ideas, and so I got two things that really we're implementing this summer. One's more passive and one's more aggressive, if I can use that way. So the passive side, and we've done this the last couple of summers, is we've had screen-free summer.
Mhm.
So again, for us, June and July, that's our summer months, super hot. So screen-free winter in South Africa. But it's counterintuitive because so many, and actually this came up in church when other teenagers here, when they hear about my kids, and they're talking about, yeah, we're in screen-free summer, which means no video games, no TV, no streaming, no tablet games, and
Mhm.
tablets are audiobooks or the Kindle books. And there's almost this reaction, like, how do you survive?
Yeah.
And I think some parents might even feel, how do you survive? What do you do? But we just walk into screen-free summer, and I want to give a word of encouragement to parents, because my middle child is the one who we have pictures of him in previous years upon the beginning of screen-free summer, watching him roll around in great dismay upon the floor, hating screen-free
Mhm.
summer. And now he's like, he even said, when does this end? And we'll typically begin in June. And this year we were traveling, so we waited until we came back. And we'll typically go all the way into September. And I'm actually going to be in South Africa August and September this year. And basically, I think they're going to go until I come back. And then they're like, okay, we can go back. But even my middle child was like, what about like making it for the rest of the year?
Mm.
Like, like maybe just sprinkle a couple of video games in. He does like, like every now and then. But this is a total attitude change
Yeah.
from where we used to be. So it's a word of encouragement to parents that, as we're doing this, it's passive in the sense we're going to pull them away from the screens. But the active side, the more aggressive side, is we sat down at the beginning of screen-free summer, and my wife had printed out basically like this little one-sheet questionnaire, and all of us filled it out. Even our littlest one, who he's like, I'm not sure how to spell some of these words. We helped him out, but the questions were revolving around, what is a place you want to eat this summer? What's an activity you want to do?
Mhm.
What's a skill you want to learn? What's a place you want to go? Just these basic questions. And we filled them out, and then we shared. And so this is sort of guiding how our summer's going to go.
Mhm.
So one of the things that came up, several people kind of listed as like, well, we want to go to the beach. So, where we are in North Carolina, about an hour and a half, hour and 45, we can hit the beach. And another, I put, I really want to see friends we haven't seen in a while. And then another child said, he wants to, um, he wanted to travel. It was something else, but there was a triangulation where beach and travel and staying with friends is going to lead us to St. Augustine, Florida, where
Yeah.
we have some friends who are there, and I've already called them up, and they're like, "Yeah, come on, come on." So this summer we're going to take a trip.
Mhm.
Why? Because that's kind of it. It fits what our family's wanting to do, and it's the kind of trip where what are we planning? Not a whole lot. We're
Yeah.
going to go, and we're going to go. And the question was, well, are we going to stay with them? Or are we going to stay elsewhere? It's like, well, that's part of that leisure is reconnecting with friends
Yeah.
and doing some of these things that you don't normally get to do because you have to do other things. And so this is again kind of an encouragement to parents to sort of get creative with this, find
Mhm.
out, and as a word of encouragement, we did this just the other day. It was right after church. We got done, and we were sitting around, and this was Father's Day, and they asked 'cause Father's Day, look at me. What do you want to do? And we'd had lunch. It's about 1 p.m. And I said, I want to go to Wilmington. Like, there's a antique shop there,
Mhm.
that real big one's like 4 buildings or something.
Wow.
And Stacy was like, "What? You want to do what? What? Okay, well," and almost like you could just see it's Father's Day. Okay, fine. And so again, we're looking about an hour and a half to get there. It's already afternoon, and it's like, well, we can get there. Everything's closing at 5. We still got a little bit of time, and we just up and went. And then we put some towels in. We actually did go to the beach at dusk,
Yeah, I saw the
and
pictures.
yeah. Oh, great
That's
times.
awesome.
But it was one of those things. Like when we got done, the boys were just so amazed. Like, this has been so nice.
Mhm.
Because it was like we were relaxed. We were just, when we got done at the antique shop, well, what are we going to do next? I don't know. Are we hungry? What are we going to do? And it was all focused around being together. And so this is why, as we think about the virtuous use of that leisure time, I think we get so wrapped up in we have to do all these things. And when you take the big trips, it's stressful. I think there's a lot of moms out there like hate packing
Yeah.
because mom has to pack for herself. She usually has to pack for all the children
Yeah.
because, in at least the case in my home, my wife does not trust me to pack for my children, and nor should my children trust me to pack for my children. So, there's this element of it's so much work to do these things, and I want to encourage families to think outside the box. I want to
Yeah.
encourage them to really find that rest and love and bond during these times rather than everybody off in their own room, their own screen. So what's one major thing I've shared some art? What's one major thing you guys are thinking about this summer as ideas for other families out there?
Well, well, not to be like super unoriginal, but yeah, the beach is always one because that's kind of what we do here in North Carolina. We have really nice beaches. Um, and I'm actually like thinking about like I think it's a really good idea what you guys did with the questionnaire, because there's things that we can like have that triangulation within my kids and our own planning, because we haven't have we have some things planned, but having that where everybody gets to do something,
Hmm.
that and it's also this is another thing that I think is important. You don't have to do the like you see all those vacations on television or whatever, like what everybody else is doing and going to the resort or doing these things. Those things are, yeah, they're good, but sometimes that they're costly. That there's a lot of that anxiety of like
Hmm.
getting there and the air, flying and other things. Like find something locally that is inexpensive and just fun, like where you can just express your, whatever you want to do. Like for instance, my daughter likes to go to this. We have this. It's called Gillis Hill Farm, and it's this old farm. It's like this when the settlers, like there's like this whole like trail you go on and you see all the animals, and talks about them settling that area of North Carolina back before when America was being settled, and you kind of get a taste of what things were like back in the day. And then afterwards, you have to do this whole lap around and check out everything. You come back and you have homemade ice cream.
Hmm.
Like that little thing is, it costs maybe like like $5 for the ice cream. Whatever that translates into in African, South African. But it's inexpensive for us, and it's a time where we can just like hang out and just go out and just be away from everything for a little bit. And
Hmm.
it's like nearby, and I just like that sort of stuff. And I think that this summer we tend to, and also I think what you brought up, which is really good, is just having that time with other believers and other people and sharing time together. So we have people from our church that I plan, we plan barbecues, and we have a young lady that's just graduated from our teen group in our church, and she's going to become a veterinarian. So we're planning on having a little barbecue for her, just personally with her family, and just hanging out, just seeing her off, and because she's meant a huge deal to us throughout the few years, and that's type of thing, and just getting
Hmm.
really connected with those who are so busy during the year and you can't do those sorts of things.
I think that's the biggest advantage to having these holidays, these breaks,
Hmm.
and to use them well, as we say, use them virtuously, but Thomas, I thank you for the
Yep,
conversation
this is
as
good.
it's we're just rolling me and you today. But you can find our podcast, Virtuous Roots, on all major streaming platforms. And you can find more information about our ministry at familiesofvirtue.com. And we'll see you next time.